Hi, this is Lolita Ejiofor, and you are listening to the We Win podcast, powered by Accelerate Her Africa. Welcome to today's episode with our guest, Dr. Idongesit Essiet-Gibson. With over 20 years at the forefront of global health and life science, she has dedicated her career to scaling high-impact innovations where digital health, emerging tech, and smart investing collide. From advising startups to guiding top-tier investors, she's seen the forefront of how breakthrough ideas transform into real-world solutions. Idongesit, it is great to have you today as our guest. So I'm going to start with asking you, what is your story? I want to understand your story, your journey into becoming who you are today, particularly how you transitioned into joining the US Army.
So thanks, Lolita, for having me on. I think it's really an honor. First of all, I want to congratulate you on this podcast and the work that you're doing with your organization. I think it's really a great initiative. I think as women, we all need, no matter what age, we all need reminders. We all need those things that help us as we deal with the challenges of living.
Yes.
And that's a loaded statement. But really so proud of you as somebody who's known you for a really long time. So you ask about my story. I will start at the very beginning. I feel like it's a bit unusual for most people because I was born in New York. My dad was working in New York. He had just finished his master's degree and he had gone to New York, but he got a job with the Ministry of Agriculture in then Cross River State. And he had moved back with me. I moved back to Nigeria when I was about 2.5 years old.
Right.
And so, of course, I had no memories of the US, but grew up in Nigeria, like any other young Nigerian girl with my family. We lived in Calabar, we lived in Uyo, and I think I met you when I ended up in Calabar because I ended up at Federal Government Girls College in Calabar.
Mm-hmm.
Those were my formative years, and I think they really influenced who I became because of those experiences, growing up as a young girl, going to high school in a town that my parents didn't live in. At the time I was in high school in Calabar, my parents had moved back to Uyo. And so I was in boarding school and that was quite the experience. And then went on to the University of Uyo where I did my undergrad in biochemistry. And just about the time I was working on my undergrad, my aunt had just moved back to the US. And so I had the opportunity, I really had talked to my dad about coming back to the US for college. And so I would say like literally the day after, like a few days after I wrote my final exams for my last year of college, I moved to the US.
Right.
And kind of started out in Miami, and I was very proud of my accomplishment of my, getting my bachelor's in biochemistry. And just before I left Nigeria, I had applied to a number of schools. I was hoping to go to medical school, so actually this is after college. So I decided, I already had the bachelor's degree in biochemistry. I really want to do something with it. I've always loved the sciences. Biology was my favorite subject in high school at FGGC Calabar.
Right.
And so that love remains. And so when I came to the US, I really wanted to do something with that degree. I wanted to stay in the sciences. And funny story, my first job in the US was working in a jewelry store, K Jewelers, as a sales girl.
Wow.
And and I remember just thinking, wow, like, you get a second class upper in biochemistry, Nigeria, and now here you are working as a sales girl in a jewelry store. Like, that is not the plan. And I remember this one day my aunt came to me and she's like, hey, I know you really want to do your science and you want to do your research. I just talked to this Navy recruiter and they said they have jobs in the sciences. So if you want to talk to them, I was like, it wasn't a path I was considering, but I was like, why not? Because I had been looking for work for months, in my field and couldn't find it. And so I was like, what? Doesn't hurt anything. And I think you kind of see that as a theme in my life. It's always like, why? Try it out. And so I went and I talked to the recruiter and the conversation was going very well until he said, you have to pass a swim test. And I said, who? I don't swim.
Right.
And actually had and still have a little bit of a fear of water. So I was like, okay, this is not going to work. So what's the next plan? He was like, well, you know what? You should talk to the guys next door. the army has some biotech and science positions, so you should check them out. And I was like, and they don't have a swim requirement, right? He says no. I said, okay, well, I'll go to the army then. And so that became a 26-year career from a stopover at an army recruiting office in a mall in Miami. So that's how I joined the army. And
Wow.
yeah, and so that's where I started my career in biomedical research in the army, moved on to public health program management for the U.S. Public Health Service. So I changed services. I did a stint a year in Iraq during the Iraq War. And when I came back, I switched over to the U.S. Public Health Service and went on to serve and did 16 years in the U.S. Public Health Service, plus my 5 years in Army active duty, plus another 5 in the reserve. So ended up with a 26-year career that has brought me to this point where I got the opportunity and the privilege to retire in January of 2020 and started out as a consultant, created my own consulting business, and really around the same. I've always loved science, and I think it's been a theme through my life because even in this stage now as a consultant working with startups in health and biotech, it's really focused around helping to fund and resource critical innovations that can transform the lives and the health of people, both here and around the world. And that has been my passion to just really help to make things better, but specifically in health.
I think that's a fascinating journey because it's not every day that, one encounters a leader, with 26 years of distinguished service in the U.S. Army and Public Health Service, managing, massive federal programs, who then steps into the world of venture capital. So I would like us to explore what inspired that transition from the structured world of the CDC and the NIH into this fast-paced environment of startups.
I think it's a great question. Of course, looking back, if one had asked if this is what I would be doing in terms of this transition, highly likely answer would be no. The traditional route for most people after spending that amount of time in the military and the government, people tend to transition into roles, either another government role as a civilian or go to work for a federal contractor. Right. But in my case, I think what really pushed my move was, one, I had worked with a career coach in my last assignment at the CDC in Zambia. Okay. And I remember that work with a coach was my first time having a professional coach, which our new supervisor had offered to all of the senior leadership within the organization. And working with the coach helped me really explore what were the things that are really of interest to me and what is the impact that I really want to have in the world. And it kind of came back to my love of science and my desire to see, technological innovations being used to improve the quality of lives of people and also reduce the mortality rates. Right. So I think of how you can encourage human flourishing through leveraging healthcare innovations. And when I say healthcare, I use the term broadly, in biotech, medtech, health tech, digital health. The ways that you can apply technology to improve health outcomes is really the stuff that I'm passionate about. That's the stuff that gets me excited. And so when I got out of the military, when I retired, I decided that I was going to work with startups because in that last assignment, I had the opportunity to work with some new companies that in our parlance would be considered startups. They were relatively new companies that had gotten into working with the government and really helping us with exactly the same thing. Like, they had bright ideas about how to leverage, smartphones or even leverage, using apps and things like that to address some of the challenges that we're facing in implementing a public health program. So, for example, one of the things that we had a challenge with was with how we get data from remote sites to headquarters for reporting, right? And, in the olden days, not in the olden days, like in the days when I got there, people were basically writing down reports on paper and then faxing it or giving it to a courier to hand deliver, piles of paper to be counted at headquarters. And I just remember one of the younger guys on the team that was one of these new companies, saying, well, is there a way that we could securely transfer this information via cell phones? Right. Could we create an app that was relatively secure to collect those numbers and transmit them electronically? And I remember at the time it was like, well, we're not really transmitting patient information. It's not private information. It's more like numbers of cases for certain indicators we're measuring for certain durations of time. And so thinking about better ways of transmitting that information and doing it securely and just kind of thinking outside the box just really made me think that there is an opportunity here for people to bring, fresh ideas, fresh perspectives into how we can get things done within the government. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of informed my decision to work with startups when I got out. And so I created my own consulting company. It's called the Ideas Group. And our focus was really on working with startups in the health, biotech space, and just helping them navigate accessing US federal government resources for funding these early stage projects that they were working on. So you think about, not just in terms of grants. I mean, a big part of it is the grants. At the time, the US government was one of the largest funders globally of public health and biotech work, including to small businesses, right? And so when I got out, my focus was on working with small businesses and helping them figure out how to position themselves and be competitive for these federal grant opportunities, and also the other federal opportunities where they had access to resources that typically would cost them tens of thousands of dollars to access on their own. And so we focused at the Ideas Group with working with startups, with smaller companies, small organizations on really navigating the federal space. I started working as a mentor through, we have what they call the Maryland Tech Council, which is a trade organization here in the state of Maryland that works with companies in the state, with really just providing them mentorship and strategic advice. And so in doing that, started attending events and things related to, like in the startup ecosystem. Right. And I remember that one of the startups I was advising mentioned to me that there's a group that she had pitched to that was a female focused angel group and really thought it was exciting and that it would be great for me to speak with the founder of the group. And that's kind of how I got into the angel investing work with She's Independent Investments, where I serve as a deal lead. And in that role, I basically help to source companies. I help to find startups that fit our investing ethos and try to find companies that I think will be of interest to our members. Because the way we do ours is that our members get to vote on companies that we have screened to decide on which ones they want to hear pitch. And then based on the pitches, there's another vote to decide on which ones we want to proceed into due diligence with.
All right. I can see a lot of intentionality in your journey, coming from your love for science and combining that with your connections with the government and then forming some form of a conduit to helping to fund medtech founders with their solutions. And it all comes together so seamlessly. I'd like us to come back to She's Independent Investments later. But first, what would you say are the differences between working in the US military versus working in the ambiguous, fast-paced world of startups? And I also want to know, what would you say are those skills, those attributes you acquired whilst in the military that has helped you in the startup world?
It's a great question when you think about it. It was an adjustment for sure, coming from the military and the government where things are very structured, processes are laid out, outcomes are predetermined. You know the tools that you have to work with. You know the structures and the rules and the confines within which you need to work with to solve the problems or create the solutions that you're trying to develop. Right. Now, in the world of startups, I agree. I mean, it's much more fluid. There's so much that's unknown, particularly in the early stages, which is where I spend most of my time. Early stage startup work has a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot that has to be proved. There's a lot that has to be learned. And I think that the thing that has really transitioned for me is, one, teams are very important in early stage startup investing. and even in supporting those teams in the work I do through the Ideas Group. And so I feel like my work in the government, we did a lot of work around leadership and management. I managed multiple teams when I was in the government, being a part of senior leadership, and of course benefited from a lot of leadership training and mentorship and those kinds of things that really help you learn about how to work with humans and how to make humans work and how to work with humans effectively. And so I feel like that has translated into my work in the startup ecosystem, really around determining when we have the right teams. Because as an investor, when you're writing that first or second check into a company, you're really betting on the founder. You're really betting on the team that, yes, the idea is a good idea, but you are saying with your dollars, I believe that this team can actually build this thing, can actually bring this thing into reality. And so I think those skills that I learned, my people management skills, my interpersonal skills, I think have really come to play in this work of engaging with startup founders.
Right.
And also, I would say that, like you, I have my project management professional certification, and a lot of my work in the government, managing all those multi-million-dollar projects, I leaned a lot on my PMP certification and training. And I would say that, where that has really come to play is in my advisory work through my company, the Ideas Group, because I work with startup founders around helping them be competitive for funding, mostly focused on federal funding, but now also working with them around investor readiness, but really helping them with processes.
Right.
Because a lot of times people who are, founders, they're really bright, they have their ideas and they know what they're trying to accomplish, but kind of stepping back from that ultimate goal of, delivering your minimum viable product or delivering that initial version of the service that you want to put into the market, taking the steps back to figure out what is it that it's going to take to get from point A to point B.
Correct.
And that's where I think my PM skills come in, because I'm able to work with the founders and kind of help them really lay out that process, lay out that plan for how they're going to get to that first milestone, and even determining which milestones they should be communicating. So really helping the founders around developing a strategy, developing a work plan, and working the plan, and helping them identify ways for monitoring progress across the board. Because if you think about it too, with startup founders, they're usually working on multiple things. They're trying to get the first version of their product developed. So you have the technical component, you have the part that they have to start engaging with potential customers, they have to start engaging with potential partners, right, that can help them deliver. And as well, a lot of founders have to start talking to potential funders, whether it's non-dilutive funding through the government or dilutive funding or equity-based funding through private investors. Like, they have multiple things that they have to be doing. And part of this is them being able to be organized and kind of really figure out which parts of the work they can delegate and which parts of the work they have to do themselves. And for most early stage founders, they are very small teams. Usually it's 1 to 3 people.
Yes.
And so they have to be very strategic around how they're spending their time and what things they're chasing and why, to be able to make sure that they can actually execute on the milestones that both the government and investors want to see once they're either applying for funding or have received funding. So really, I feel like those are the key, I would say those are the 2 big things that have really translated from my government work into this fast-paced world of startups.
Yeah, I think my major takeaway here is understanding the processes. A lot of founders are doing things they're doing trial and error. They're not exactly documenting the customer journey. So there's a lot of support required in those areas. And having a project management background definitely helps to address that. This naturally leads to your current very unique expertise. Through the Ideas Group, you help founders navigate the complex world of federal funding. I'd love for our listeners, many of whom will be entrepreneurs or are entrepreneurs, to hear your insider perspective and discuss some of those common mistakes you see, startups make when they approach these large agencies. So your passion for digital health innovation would also be a fantastic topic to explore here.
So that's a great question. So I have to say, I mostly work with health and biotech founders. So in that space, I think one of the biggest challenges being a scientist myself and a public health professional, we tend to be very technical in our communication. And I think one of the things that I have found with our technical science, particularly scientists starting, businesses or people just in the health sector in general, whether it's a nurse or, a doc, a lot of the investors that you're going to meet, I mean, there are investor groups that are very specific. Like you have, doctors who invest in other doctors, but most investment organizations are just regular people, mostly people with business and finance backgrounds who get into this. I think somebody with my kind of background is more of a rarity, so they're not scientists and they're not biochemists. They're not technical in that sense. And so a lot of times when founders try to pitch investors, I find that for technical founders, they tend to be a bit too technical.
Right.
And learning to come back and speak in plain language to really articulate the value, articulate the problem that you're solving, and articulate why you and your team are the best people to solve this problem is something that I think I've found that, people struggle with.
Right.
Because I always joke that, there's a certain arrogance that we have as scientists and health professionals that we're just like, what do you mean you don't we know this and we talk a certain way and we kind of pride ourselves in that. But when you're crossing that boundary into asking people to write checks for you, you have to take a step back and really articulate why this is important. So I'll give you an example. So we had a founder who had a solution for how you can conduct certain kinds of experiments in the lab, not in animals. So when you're creating a product, life science products, usually we have to do animal tests. You do testing in the lab before you get to animal testing, before you can actually put it in humans and then get to process. But he had come with a platform that allows you to do some of that testing that you have to do in animals. He was able to get some of it done in the lab, leveraging AI and other tech to be able to get some of those results and so reduce the number of animal studies that you have to do.
Right.
And he was successful because he was really good at explaining to non-scientists why this was important and why it was different. Being able to articulate the time savings, the cost savings, the increased accuracy, the better results, the greater applicability of the results because of the kind of platform that they had for this testing. And he just did a really great job of being able to communicate it in a way that wasn't intimidating or kind of talking down to people who were not in that. Because it's a very technical area when you think about it.
Yeah.
But he was able to break it down and he had a lot of success with raising funds. So he actually had an oversubscribed round. And I think a big part of that was due to his ability to articulate that. And he was also able to articulate the strength of his team, why this is the team that could execute this, that they had the relevant background, they had the relevant expertise, they had the relevant connections, because they were already talking to potential clients. They were actually testing and building out their prototypes in collaboration with potential clients. And so they had already had paid pilots. And, those kinds of things just raise an investor's confidence and make it a little easier for you to write that check. Because I always tell people, you have to think that for investors, they're taking a chance on you.
Correct.
Everybody knows that in angel investing, venture capital, that this money can walk away. You may not see any of it. And the investor's job, and I think even more so even for venture capitalists, where a lot of times you're investing other people's money, there's an expectation of a return for your fund. And so they're being also very careful about who they're deciding to put the money into, because they need to be able to deliver on that rate of return that they've promised their limited partners, the people who are contributing to their fund. And so they are also trying to be very diligent about who they put that money into.
Right.
So it's, I think for founders, it's just really remembering who your audience is.
Correct.
Because I think that if you're presenting at a scientific conference, it's a completely different ball game. There you're being very technical. You're showing that you understand the science, you understand the background of science and the application and how this is moving the technology forward. But when you're presenting to an investor, you still want to show that your innovation is moving the technology forward. You're solving this problem for this particular population or a particular component of the population. But you've got to be able to do it without sounding so technical that you lose them because they are not going to write a check. I think I heard somebody say this once, and I think it's very true. An investor is not going to write a check for something they don't understand. And I have to say, when they say don't understand how it's going to work and why it works and why somebody's going to pay for it. But they don't necessarily have to understand all the nuts and bolts in the background. But they have to know how this thing works, why it works, and why people are going to be willing to pay for it.
That makes a whole heap of sense. I mean, it's just like, you're speaking Chinese to me, but I only understand English. If I don't understand the value proposition, what am I really investing in?
You made me think of something, Lolita. Just one more thing.
Okay.
Bringing it down to something that people are familiar with. So everybody knows about the big hype today is AI, right? We all have either seen ChatGPT, used ChatGPT, or know somebody who's used ChatGPT. And so just one of the things that we've talked about this in a couple of investor conversations around, people just throw on AI onto the slide. That's great. But AI is so broad, has so many applications, there's so many versions of it. What are you talking about? And why does that specific form of AI add value to your solution, right? How does this help? How does this make it better for the potential customer? Why would they pay for this? Because it can't just be AI for the sake of AI, but this AI is solving a particular thing or making something possible that wasn't possible before, or making something better that was slower or more expensive, but you've got to be able to make that connection. But, I see, founders are just kind of throw it on there, AI powered or AI enabled, or, okay, why, what's the AI adding to it? And which type of AI specifically? So just thought I'd throw that in there.
It's like, when you have a founder who has a mediocre business and puts AI on top of it, it's the same thing as someone making mediocre jollof rice.
Yeah.
And then before serving it, puts a sprinkle of saffron on it to serve a discerning African palate. I hear you. So let's talk about, we park She's independent investment. Let's get back to that. It will be so valuable to hear what you look for when you're evaluating startups, especially ones led by women.
Yeah. So, thanks. So She's Independent Investments is a group I really like. And I think, of course, I'm partial because it was a group that that has given me the space to learn and just really grow in private investing. And so I came on with them just volunteering and kind of ended up in the role of, serving as a deal lead for the group. And basically that role is helping to identify companies that are a potential good fit for our investors. So we are a group of 100 plus women from around the country, a few people from outside of the US who come together and create a syndicate vehicle to make investments in individual companies. So we kind of work on a quarterly cycle. Right. And so we review deals quarterly. And so I would say in a nutshell, what we look for. So we are a sector agnostic group, and we tend to invest in pre-seed and seed plus. And we've done a couple of Series A bridge type investments as well. And we always say, okay, we're not an impact fund, but we love founders who are building something that's solving a real problem in the world. So for instance, if you just have you have an app, a new gaming app, it's probably not the kind of thing we would be attracted to. Our women tend to be more attracted to solutions. So real life solutions. So we've made investments in companies that are in the climate space. We have a company that is in our portfolio that has a new way of transporting energy in a way that you lose less in the course of that transport. And that was actually a male founder, but we really liked his approach to solving that problem. We love female founders, but we also love people who are solving problems that affect women. Right. So for instance, an investment we made, I want to say either earlier this year or last year, was in a male founder who had a company out of Israel that has a solution to help with complications during childbirth. So he created a device that currently the way doctors manage that particular problem is manually, like literally using their hands and trying to maneuver. But he developed a tool that can help to safely maneuver the baby and deliver and help with the delivery process. And so reducing significantly the number of children that are born with birth defects because of the, trauma coming through the birth canal. And so that was something that our group, once we heard about it, the group was very excited about. Right. And so we tend to look for things that are like building something in a space that a solution that does what you're doing doesn't currently exist for. And I know that's kind of broad, but really looking for stuff that's impactful and really attractive to us if you're solving a problem that impacts women. And it's not only physical in terms of health problems, but we've had companies that are building services to support, like women-owned businesses, helping them figure out how to go from initial registration and how to really build it out and grow their client base and things like that. But the key thing is that because angel investing is still in the venture capital, it's still in that private investing group, it's all about, is this a venture scale business? In the sense that, is this something that can grow to multiple millions of dollars in sales per year? Like I think that's an easy way to think about it. I saw a lovely chat the other day on LinkedIn that somebody had created to kind of identify some of the markers of a venture scale business. But it's got to be a business that's growing like 10x or higher. Like rapid growth is what we're looking for. Something that, because you have to think about why are you taking this money? You're taking money from venture capitalists and angel investors to fund that rapid growth that you have. And so that's what a venture scale business is. So say, for instance, you're running hair salons, right? It's really good, but you're growing from like one city to another city. Now, is that a typical venture scale? We'd say, no, maybe that's more of a lifestyle business because you're opening one branch and it takes you time to open another one and another one. But let's say you came up with, there's a chain in the US, I forget what it's called, that it's called something to do with, I think it's something dry bar. I can't remember the exact name. But she started one salon, did another one, but came up with a concept that was almost like franchise-like, where they had this template that they could go into another city and create the exact same salon with the exact same services and provide that same value to the customer, and we're able to replicate it and then rapidly scale. So within a few years, they went to hundreds of locations around the US. Right. And so that is more of a venture scale thing, because now if you're putting in hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in there, you know that you're actually driving the growth. Because in that case, so you think about, I've heard somebody describe venture money as like the kindle to the fire, right? Like it's like the gasoline that you pour into the fire to make the fire bigger. So that's where the tricky part is for investors, is figuring out, is this solution that you're building something that is going to rapidly grow? And that rapid growth is based on injecting this capital to scale something that you've already built. So you already have a model, a structure, that all you're really missing is that money to be able to do that rapid expansion. And of course, venture capitalists and angel investors don't just come with money. We also come with, advisory and, networking, connecting our founders to key industry players, connecting our founders to key potential clients. So it's a larger packet than just the funds, but the funds is the big part, is the one that everybody sees first. And it's a big driver in that decision making of whether you get the funding or not.
I love how She's Independent is very intentional in how they select founders who are trying to solve a problem in the world. And it's important that impact is at the forefront of the founder's vision. And not only that, you're also ensuring that the business is scalable, and not just scalable, rapidly scalable. So the investment they receive will help to drive that growth, which is also very important. So I want us to address the elephant in the room, specifically the systemic barriers that still exist for women when it comes to raising investments. And I'd like you to offer advice to other successful women who want to consider being angel investors for the first time.
Yeah, that's a great question, talking about potential barriers, particularly around gender. I think the data shows that, female founders account for a very small percentage of investment dollars, whether it's I mean, I think angel investing has numbers that are a little bit better, but I don't know by a whole ton. But it is not only in the US, but around the world that we have fewer female founders actually accessing these funds and getting these investments that really help to scale their ventures. And so I would say that, one of the things that struck me in making my transition from the government and military to getting into the world of private investing is that, in Nigeria, we have a saying, we say, man, no man. There's quite a bit of, in America, we say it's networks, right? Your networks but it's who you know. Who you know plays a bigger part into who gets dollars than one would hope. And then for women, a lot of times women don't have those networks and those connections with the big funders, with the big VC groups, with the groups that are able to write this big checks that they need to really scale their ventures. And so I think the relationship thing is a part of it. We have women in finance and business, but it seems like we just don't seem to have the kind of connections that some of the men do. And I think also with women, one of the things that I've found, like the female founders that I've found that are very successful are women they're very bold, they're very confident. I mean, confidence is a huge currency in this business.
It is.
And I have to say that also surprised me a bit about how much of VC and angel investing goes into a big play is the confidence of the founder or the founding team. Confidence that they can deliver, confidence in their expertise, confidence that they are the right ones to do this. And I think because women, whether it's culturally, I mean, I grew up in Nigeria, so I grew up as a young Nigerian girl, and in that culture where, women are taught to, you're supposed to be quieter, you're supposed to be, not boastful and, all of these things. And it's kind of counter to what is rewarded in venture. Because in venture and private investing, it's the bold, it's the confident founder who can, throw out her numbers and can confidently speak to the challenges and how they're going to overcome them and, all of this. So I think there's an aspect of that also impacts female founders. Right. And being which is independent, I've seen a lot of female founders pitch, not just for our group, but, I go to a number of investor events and there is a difference and so I would really say that's one area that that's fixable, right? That you can work on as a founder, practicing before you go to pitch, practicing, get your confidence up, being able to speak confidently about what you're building, why you're building it, why you're the right person, why you're able to lead this team, why you have the vision and you feel that you can implement it. Because it's almost like you're convincing me as an investor that you are the right person and you can get this done and that's why I should give you the dollars. Mm-hmm. So I think that contributes to the gender gap. I wouldn't say it's the biggest part. And then, of course, there's bias and, there's multiple conversations around it, but I think the data, so as a scientist, I always point you back to the data, but the data shows that, there's inherent bias which people have. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to something like investing where you're basically voting with your dollars that I believe that this person can, accomplish this ambitious goal that they've set, right? Because of the way that women are perceived in any culture, including our American culture, people don't always think of the woman as the person that's going to lead, the strong leader with the vision that can execute and can make things happen. And even though we have women who are functioning in those roles in multiple, segments of society, I think when people have to vote with their own personal dollars, there's still that bit of hesitation that am I really going to go with a female? And then I think particularly for female founders that are solving problems that are mostly women problems, like if you're a female founder who's creating an innovation in women's health or something like that, like, or you're trying to serve female business owners or anything like that, then people think about the bulk of the check writers in the world are male. Right. And so writing a check to a woman to solve a woman-focused problem, I don't know. I don't know if that's really where I want to put my money. Because at the end of the day, that's the decision. Do I really want to put my money into this? And so I think that those factors do impact, but it's a work in progress, right? And I think it's one that you have to take a multi-pronged approach to solve. So we need more women investing, which is why I like groups like She's Independent, women who are professional women. And I keep telling people, you don't have to be a millionaire to do this, because God knows I'm not a millionaire. But it's women who are professional women. You have a career, you have a decent, income stream. Allocating some of that income to investing in startups, I think it's risky, of course. Like, we're not going to deny that. That's why there are rules around who can invest. But I think that you should, as any professional woman, take the time to do that diligence to see, am I eligible to participate in this method of investing, beyond just buying stocks, beyond just investing in mutual funds and other things. Do I have enough disposable income that I can put some aside to this? And I think also, because the more women that write checks, the more likely it is that more female founders are given that opportunity to build and grow. And so we need more female check writers. We need more women taking that bold step of deciding that they're going to be the ones to solve a problem. But I would say surround yourself with a good team, both your operational team, but also advisory teams, getting the kind of mentoring and support that organizations like yours, Lolita, provide. Just surrounding yourself with the people that are going to give you that are going to help build that courage and that confidence for you to go forth and solve the problem. I think that's stuff that we can do to address some of the bias and some of the gaps that currently exist.
Yeah, it's really important that women are investing in other women, especially women investors, because that's going to increase the number of female founders changing the world and ultimately reducing that inherent bias. Okay, so, you're a scientist and you're a geek. And I know that there are some scientific breakthroughs and new ideas of innovation coming up. What is making you excited right now?
Wow. I mean, it's a great question. It's hard to pick one. I think I'll go with, one that I know you probably have thoughts on this as well. But the application of artificial intelligence, right? Just the increased ability to automate a lot of manual processes gets me excited for work in this field. Okay. When we think about the life sciences, where you're going from a molecule that somebody identifies in the lab and trying to get from there to an actual drug that somebody takes for a certain indication, a certain condition, it's a long path. I think on average, it's something between 10 to 12 years between when a molecule is discovered and when you can do all the trials, actually get formulated into a drug and actually get it through approvals to get it to market. I think the timeline is somewhere between 10 to 12 or more years. A big part of that is the research that has to be done, right? You have to characterize the molecule, then you have to figure out in which modes is it most effective and how you're going to deliver it. Is it going to be IV? Is it going to be a tablet? So there's a lot of work that goes into taking an active molecule that has potential against a particular disease and then working that through all the way to something that actually ends up in a patient. Right. And a lot of that is the research. There's a lot of data that you have to get through. There's a lot of there's studies that have to be done. There's research studies in the laboratory, then there's animal studies, then there's the studies in humans, and a lot of data gets generated in that process. And there's technologies that are emerging to help to analyze these results much faster, think through the multiple different applications or implications of the data that you're collecting. And what are all the different ways that this data can be applied? And what are the different solutions that you can develop based on this data that you have? It's a very complex process. And I think that it's one that could really benefit from augmentation with artificial intelligence, with, whatever kind of technologies can help to automate that process and just support that human decision making, because the human decision making is never going to go away, right? Because we as humans have that ability to make ethical decisions and the ability to weigh the pros and cons. And there's just a human component to all of it that you need. But I do think that these automation tools can help speed up the process by helping humans get through larger volumes of data in a shorter amount of time. And so any technologies that help along those ways, any technologies that would help to expedite getting scientific innovations from the laboratory to actual drugs or other interventions for patients, I am absolutely excited about, and I am passionate about being part of the process that brings these things to patients much quicker.
Yeah, I totally understand the importance of automation of processes and speeding up research to bring solutions to your patients. You also touched on an area that a previous guest, Dr. Jania, spoke about, which is ethical AI. Having that intervention by humans just to check and make sure that the information doesn't contain any bias. Wow. Idong, I'd like to thank you today for being our guest. Your insights have been valuable. I'm sure our listeners are wowed by everything you've talked about today. But before we go, do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share?
Thank you, Lolita. And thank you for the opportunity again to be able to, share my story and be part of this conversation. I think the work that you're doing is critical work. I think in terms of dealing with some of these barriers, looking back on so now if I add in the time I've spent, in investing, I'm going on a 30-year career. It is support, right? The point you mentioned earlier. With the right support, women, girls, young women anywhere can be successful. Right. Whether it's in building their own venture and getting venture capital, or building their own venture and just running it on their own and making things happen. But I think what does that is that confidence. So part of getting that confidence is getting the right training for whatever it is that you're trying to do. Get the right training, get around the people who are doing the things that you want to do. And I use this platform to implore other women who've done it, women who've successfully built, women who've successfully raised. Please share your story with another woman, especially a young woman. Share your story. Give some time. It doesn't have to be all your time, because I understand. I also get overwhelmed with requests. But it's, making a little time to just talk to somebody, to just answer some questions, to just share a story, to just share a lesson you learned. I think it goes a long way. That's how we're going to get to where we're trying to go to. But it's going to take support, and support doesn't have to cost money. Like, we can at least start with what we have, which is having those who've gone before help those who are coming along. Correct. And we can get there. Correct. Definitely. And of course, with the help of God, who's merciful and is on our side.
Yes. So, Idong mentioned a few things, and my takeaway is we are all here to live our purpose. We want to start businesses. We want to be entrepreneurs, but we also need investment. And one of the things she mentioned is funding the next generation, paying it forward. We need women investing in women. So you women investors out there, look out for the business that's being run by a woman who is working her damn hardest. And let's progress as a sisterhood. So I want to say a huge thank you to all of you listening. Until the next episode, goodbye.